and then I hand the host over to Keira. Where is she? Make host, and Keira's gonna introduce herself. Wait, change host. Okay, this is Keira. She's a bit of a legend. Go.
Let me share slides, hopefully. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Play from start. So hi, my name's Keira Forsyth. I'm at the ripe old age of 24. I'm here to talk to you all about the 3 chapters that have shaped my life so far. I hope it sort of highlights that you can become proactively resilient, adapt to change, and the importance of those who you surround yourself with. So I find it's always best to start at the beginning. So I'll start at chapter 1 of my life, being able-bodied. So in 1997, I blessed my family with my presence. I think that's the only way to say it. I was a happy, healthy child with a somewhat mild intellect, which might have been a slight stretch. My limitations were normal. My plans for the future were really normal. They were determined by my social skills, my intelligence, and my work ethic. Limitations, for the most part, were set by me for me. Did I want to work hard, revise for my exams? And the only thing society really set was grade boundaries to get into university. So I decided I wanted to do sort of sport rehabilitation or physiotherapy. And I knew which university I wanted to go to and what grades I needed to make this possible. But other than that, my opportunities were pretty much endless, and I could choose my path in life with no one really questioning it. I'd really supported friends and family, and my only hindrance was that I was painfully shy. And I hope by the end of this, you realise that is no longer the case. So I participated in every single sport imaginable, everything from canoeing to rugby, football to golf. But my main sport was taekwondo, which I did with my family. As soon as I realised it was a sport where I could kick boys in the head, I thought this is the one for me. I did it with my family, and my family was my absolute everything. We spent every weekend together. And my sister was my best friend. We even spent all of our free time in school together, which, as you can imagine, was seen as really cool. And this was sort of chapter 1 of my life. And then 2012 onset chapter 2 of my life, having an invisible disability. So in 2012, just before my 15th birthday, I was walking my dog whilst on a caravan holiday when I saw a squirrel up ahead. I decided to announce to my dog that I'd spotted said squirrel, and unsurprisingly to most, he chased it. Now, this would have only been a minor mistake, except I decided to put my wrist through the plastic part of the retractable dog lead. I can only assume it was so I could text one of my many, many boyfriends of the time. So I began running to try and get my wrist from out of the dog lead, but I couldn't. I blacked out after falling and breaking my wrist, and then I was dragged until the lead finally came off. I would like to say that this was a particularly large dog. It would make my story so much cooler, but it was a really old and somewhat frail whippet. And this started chapter 2 of my life. So when the cast was finally removed from my left arm, I was in extreme pain to the point that I was passing in and out of consciousness. Doctors wrote this off as me being a drama queen, which I am, but the pain was really bad, but they discharged me anyway. And this pain lasted for 2 weeks. I'd broken quite a few bones at this point. I was a really clumsy child who participated in contact sport, but this pain was far worse than anything I'd ever experienced. And after 2 weeks, I began to lose sensation in my fingertips, and it gradually spread all the way up to my elbow. And for the next 18 months, my left forearm and hand were basically partially paralysed. I couldn't move my fingers without looking at them. I had no sensation, and I even broke fingers and burnt my arm on the oven top with no pain whatsoever. Doctors again assumed I was faking it. So I was passed from doctor to doctor and no one knew what was happening until I finally got the diagnosis of complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. So I now had an invisible disability, a rare disability, and at that I had a version medical professionals had only seen once before. So I was the first person with this numbness that most hospitals had ever seen. So I was brought in for hours so that medical professionals and students could see the girl with the numb arm. So my life had changed over something as simple as a squirrel. It turns out I'd been born with this condition, but there's no way of knowing you have it until something triggers it. If anyone's seen the Disney film Mulan, they say it only takes 1 grain of rice to tip a scale, and that's how I like to describe CRPS. It takes one particular pain signal for your brain to misread, and that's all it takes for the nerves to then send non-stop pain signals to the brain. The brain then panics over these signals and just assumes the worst pain possible in a non-stop loop. However, in my case, they believed this had begun to happen. So my brain, in order to try and protect itself, had shut down all the messages from my arm. So I now wasn't getting any at all. At 15, my life had completely changed. But an invisible disability did have its advantages. People didn't know that I had it. They didn't know that I was relearning how to do everyday basic tasks and constantly having to think about where my arm was and what it was doing. And for the most part, it looked like it did before. Teachers saw that I was missing school for medical trials and they couldn't understand why, because it looked the same. And having an invisible disability was hard at times. Medics were constantly asking me to prove that I had it, but CRPS doesn't have a test. You can't prove you have it. And this was hard enough to face, but friends started to question me. People would hit my arm to see if I could feel it. A girl even bit my arm once in PE, which to this day is up there with one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me, but she thought it was completely normal. She now has a child, so you do worry for the future. And trying to prove yourself constantly took resilience to try and stay calm and polite when every day came with the same questions. Even those who I thought were my closest friends began to make comments about staying awake at sleepovers to see if they could hurt my arm without me waking up. So I cut these people out of my life and waved them goodbye because I did not need that. I learned to play all of my sports one-handed, and I participated in school just like I had before. And for the most part, people didn't even notice I was doing things differently. Our family motto during this time was, it's not that you can't do something, it's that you can't do it yet. So we found ways to adapt everyday tasks to overcome every little challenge so that I could move closer to completing tasks. And then one day I woke up and I could feel my bed sheet on my arm and I couldn't believe it. I started frantically rubbing my arm and I burst into tears. So I ran into my parents' room and we all had a good family cry. And life was normal again. For a whole year, my life was back on its predicted path. People weren't limiting what they thought I could and couldn't do, and my arm wasn't physically limiting what I could do. Medical professionals at this point were baffled, but CRPS can go into remission. So again, I was sort of a medical marvel. This lasted for a whole year until one day clumsy me fell down the stairs in school, which by my standards was nothing unusual. And I started to get pins and needles in my hand, but I sort of brushed it off and got on with my day. I went to Taekwondo that night and blocked a punch with my left arm and I dropped to the floor crying and my pain had come back. I just kept screaming to my dad, basically, the pain's come back. So I now had an invisible disability again, but this time it wasn't as easy to deal with. I underwent numerous medical trials and I was on high levels of morphine at all times, along with experimental drugs and even a spinal cord surgery where I had an electrical device pushed up and into my spine while I was awake. But nothing relieved the pain, which is described as being worse than an amputation. The medication made me zombie-like. It worried my parents watching me stumble, drool, and I would lose track mid-sentence. But this is what I had to do to satisfy doctors that I was trying absolutely everything to get rid of the pain. Medical trial side effects impacted my kidneys, my brain function, my immune system, and both my sense of sight and smell. And the pain was relentless. It felt like from my elbow to my fingertips, my arm was on fire, constantly burning with stabbing pains. And if anything was to touch my arm, this pain would get even worse and it would last for hours. I would cry, scream, I would be sick and I would pass out. And this was just a daily occurrence for me. The pain was constant and it was excruciating and it was always on my mind. It meant that rain couldn't touch my arm, clothing couldn't touch my arm, and my own fingers couldn't even touch each other without the pain getting worse. So I slept in 15-minute intervals for an average of 2 hours a night. So I was no longer really a functioning human being. I wouldn't say I was myself, and I had to relearn how to do everything all over again. This is the McGill Pain Index, with CRPS being classified as worse pain than childbirth, the amputation of a finger, and fractures. Women are always told the worst pain we'll ever experience is childbirth, but I'd already surpassed this pain. I'd fractured my cheekbone before, collarbone, and nothing compared. And I hope you all notice man flu isn't on the list at all, which is strange, really. Could you all make out like it should be? So I was told by medical professionals to drop out of school and to claim benefits and to just basically wrap myself up in bubble wrap and continue trying medical trials. This pain lasted for 4 years. During this time, I probably only cried about 3 times, feeling sorry for myself. I would always say I wasn't dying and people in the world had it worse off than me. And I was so thankful that it had happened to me and not my sister, because it's believed to be hereditary. So it was almost a 50-50 of who got it. And I was so pleased it was me and not her. Everyone would comment on how smiley and upbeat I was, even though I was basically being told at 17 my life was over. Again, I lost friends during this time. Comments were now made about staying up at sleepovers so people could see if I actually slept or if my hand was to touch anything. Teachers didn't understand why I was missing so much school, and that when I was in school, I was so tired and on so much medication that I didn't perform as I'd been predicted. But I chose to do what the hospital deemed impossible and continue with school in order to still try and get to university, even though that meant resitting an entire year of exams, as I struggled to formulate sentences at times, let alone put pen to paper. Another thing that was deemed impossible was getting a job. I was told by medics that I wouldn't be able to work, but in my head, if I couldn't do what every other normal 18-year-old was doing, I was going to try and do this. I was rejected time after time because I was told jobs were deemed impossible to do one-handed. Even if I knew I was capable of doing them, employers didn't want to give me the chance. I finally got a job at a supermarket after being rejected for 15 other jobs. And employers told me they didn't think I'd be able to fold clothes, carry boxes, I wouldn't be able to count change, or they wouldn't let me roll my sleeve up in order to wear their uniforms. But when I was given the opportunity to work, I did every job my 2 armed colleagues could do. And many customers and colleagues didn't even notice I was only using the 1 arm. Although I will admit bag packing was not my strength, and it was reflected in my customer feedback. So during this time, what required more resilience than the pain was overlooking the comments people thought they could make. People would say things like not bothering to use that arm today, or comments like you look dead, or I'd hate to be you. And these were really hard to take when you were trying to function in constant pain with a lack of sleep and high levels of medication. On a daily basis, I would get dressed at around 2 a.m. Whatever I wore would be what I would have to wear for the whole day. So if the weather changed, I couldn't change. I showered with my arm outside of the curtain, and I would wash my arm at night around passing out. I would tie my hair, cut my nails, all around throwing up and passing out, in order to ensure that by the time the worst of the pain had gone, I would be ready to go to school. And my support network got me through all of this. We focused every day on what we'd overcome already in order to make the next challenge seem smaller. And then the third chapter of my life really spiced things up. So I finally persuaded a doctor and a surgeon to go against medical advice and allow me to have an amputation. CRPS can spread, so lobbing off a limb was not taken lightly, but I begged for a better quality of life. So the hopeful outcome of the amputation was a 25% pain reduction. And for me, I needed to know I'd tried everything, so these were good odds. And after 4 years of constant pain, I had my arm amputated in 2019 and welcomed my lifelong companion, Stumpy, into the world. I woke up in no pain whatsoever, and to this day have had no pain. And this isn't what was expected to happen at all. And myself, medics, and my support network just couldn't believe it. And this chapter was finally my decision. I now had a visible disability, and I'd longed at times for people to be able to see there was a reason I had to do things differently. However, it had provided a comfort blanket knowing sometimes I could just blend in and people didn't have to know I was disabled. This chapter also brought limitations, but I was pre-warned about them. Obvious ones like learning to adapt to having half an arm, but people worried about how a young girl might take a confidence knock. And I was also told people are strange and comments will follow. But at this stage, I just didn't really care because I was pain-free. By this stage, my support network was already small, and my amputation made it smaller again. People made comments about how the way it looked made them feel sick, or people became obsessed with sharing their disabled friend on social media. And I just wasn't about that. So me and Stumpy waved them goodbye. And my quality of life was just non-comparable. I slept more than a night than I used to in a week, and I'm now the napping queen. I drop like a toddler wherever I go, and I will out nap anyone. I'm now no longer on any medication, so I feel human again. I went out in the rain for the first time and my whole family cried. I put on a coat for the first time and my whole family cried. And when I returned to work, customers were just baffled. I'd served some of them for years, and some of them had never even noticed that I only used one arm, and now suddenly I only had the one. Adapting was so much easier. I didn't need to worry about knocking my arm, so I learned to tie my hair up, carry things, open jars without a second thought. My dating life is still dire, and people make comments like, why would you want to date a deformed freak? Or why would you want to be a carer? Customers made comments like, where is your arm? As if I dropped it on aisle 3. Or your poor parents, I bet they never hoped for a disabled child. But losing my arm brought confidence, and I no longer cared what these people thought or said because I was living my best life. Chapter 3 also allowed me to do the impossible every day. When I was having my amputation, my mum organised for an Olympic hammer thrower I'd met at the 2014 Commonwealth Games to come and visit. While he was there, I said if I was to stay pain-free, my dream was to go back to Taekwondo, the sport I'd loved as a child. Mark told me he happened to know people at GB Taekwondo, so he would reach out to people for me. He posted a photo on his Instagram saying what an inspiration I was, and the Paralympics GB coach saw the post and followed me. I messaged him about how I could access disability taekwondo, and he invited me to the Great Britain Taekwondo Centre. I was now doing the ultimate impossible for me. I was doing the sport I loved and was told I would never be able to do again. Although I'm only in remission and my pain could technically come back, I like to think of things positively. I say I like to live each day as if it's my last day pain-free. So I choose to do what I love and what makes me happy every single day and surround myself by positive people, so that if my pain ever does come back, I can look back on this time and know that I really lived it and did what I wanted to do. I began training with Rob to prepare me for Olympic level training, and he changed my whole perspective on what was possible to do with one arm, even if he did make me sick on more than one occasion, and it did become known as having a Keira or doing a Keira. I also have a home gym, and I recently added Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into the mix because I clearly wasn't doing enough already. I train 5 days a week, and I get invited to train with Team GB with the hopes of qualifying for the 2024 Paralympic Games in Paris. We converted a greenhouse into a taekwondo gym during lockdown to help me fulfill this dream, and thankfully no tomatoes were harmed in the process. I'm also completing a university degree around this, and I managed to change my career, even though I am pleased to report that before leaving Marks and Spencer's, my bag packing skills were 10 out of 10, and I really showed people how to do it one-handed. So I'm now 9 years on from my life changing forever. I'm 24 and I've learned how to do everything in a completely new way, even if it takes me twice as long or 5 steps more than it used to. I love pushing myself to do the impossible every day, and I've proven that it can be done. I would never change what happened to me. The worst part was how it affected everyone around me, but it changed my whole mindset. I went from being a shy, really awkward child to someone who does not shut up and speaks her mind and pushes herself to be more resilient than ever. But it taught me that resilience is in everyone, no matter how unassuming. Sometimes it just takes that one grain of rice to bring it out of you. So I hope today that maybe I'm the grain of rice that inspires you to be proactively resilient. And it highlights the importance of those who surround yourself with. I like to think of everyone as cheerleaders, so you should be cheering for everyone in their pyramids to build them up, and the people in your pyramid should be cheering to build you up. And if people aren't doing that, you say goodbye to them. So this is my story of a castanets career halved. If anyone has any questions or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer.
That was awesome, that, Keira. Has anyone got any questions? Wow, from Guy. Feel free to ask away, guys. It's a bit of a legend. It's been on TV and everything. No? I just know from working with Keira, like there's never been a barrier, really. We've always just adapted, haven't we, to things. Just throwing yourself in the deep end, and yeah, doing a Keira became a thing. So if you throw up, you've just done a Keira. That's it. It's a thing. But I think we can learn a lot from what she said there, especially around surrounding yourself with the right sort of people. John said it before as well. There's going to be people around you that are like rocks and drag you down, and people around you that are like bubbles. Don't be afraid of having a small circle, but you just need the right people. And then just look what Keira's done. Anyone got any questions? Awkward silence. Just embrace the awkwardness.